Here's the bottom line up front for those of you that don't want to watch a long video. These are my main takeaways. Number one, you have to be responsible for yourself. No one else is going to do it for you. The government and the media will not even inform you in time to do anything worthwhile. While the disaster is ongoing and before, in the lead up, you are on your own. Be ready to evacuate. Right now, you should stop watching this video and go make preparations and plans in case you ever have to evacuate from anything. Stay safe while the actual event is happening. Flood, fire, earthquake, whatever, shelter in place. Do not become another victim that someone else has to save. Do not drive through floodwaters, you damn morons. You should prep. You should be a prepper. You should stockpile beanie weenies and food and toilet paper and whatever else you think you might need. Just as you should be prepped to evacuate, you should be prepped to shelter in place for a long time. Community is everything. And that's a cliche. And you'll watch YouTube and there'll be a lot of like prepper dudes in their camo saying, hey guys, community is everything. Unless you have lived through it, you have no idea what you're talking about. Community is everything. So there's the bottom line up front. Those are my major takeaways from Helene. Now, if you would like to grab an MRE and some 10-year-old bottled water, we can sit down and talk about this stuff in depth. It has been 6 months to the day. And the thing that still gets me, the thing that sticks with me is the helicopters. I don't know if I miss the helicopters. Sometimes I think that I do, and sometimes I think I never want to hear a helicopter again. For weeks and weeks, there was constant chopper traffic, and the earth would like rumble with these big military, the Chinooks and the Blackhawks would come over, and then it stopped. They went away, and it felt like, okay, we made it, it's over. But it wasn't over, and it's still not over. This is my Helene Prepping Takeaways video. Long awaited. I've been saying I was going to make this video for 6 months, and I didn't really mean to make it on the 6-month anniversary, but last night we stepped out into our yard and watched giant helicopters fly over because they were taking water to fight the forest fires that are burning all around us. And I can't really describe the feeling of watching that after Helene. And so I thought, tomorrow it's time to make that video. Here's a little bit of context. I am not a doomsday prepper. I am not a badass or any kind of survival commando kind of guy. I am just some dude that makes videos in his garage. But my family did survive Hurricane Helene within the city limits of Asheville, North Carolina. Now, we did not lose our house. We did not lose any family members. We did not lose a pet. We didn't have significant property damage. But one of the takeaways is that if you were under that cloud, you are a survivor. Now, maybe you're one of those preppers that lives in an underground shelter, but if you have been above ground in the last 6 months, you know that Hurricane Helene came up from the Gulf of Mexico and just obliterated everything in its path. Asheville, I think in larger national media, Asheville sort of became ground zero because we were the biggest metropolitan area, but it was actually a much more widespread disaster than I think the outside world understands. There were 26 counties, I believe, in the declaration of emergency, and some of the hardest hit areas per capita were the outlying counties. Before Hurricane Helene arrived, we had what is known as a predecessor rain event, which means that the storm basically, ahead of its path, squeezed a bunch of water out of the sky right on top of us. So by Thursday afternoon, in some parts of Asheville, floodwaters had already risen in the streets to the window level on an average car. And then Hurricane Helene hit Friday morning. It hit around dawn. I slept through most of it. I had been through hurricanes before. I survived Hurricane Hugo as a child. And then in 2004, I was living here with my wife, and we survived the back-to-back double punch of Francis and Ivan, which was the biggest flood I had ever seen at that point. A tree came down in our yard about 6 in the morning, and it came down on the side of the house where my son, his room isn't. And I woke up and I thought, it's already down. Do I really? I don't need it. He's fine. He's still asleep. I don't want to wake him up. And then I heard other trees falling, and I thought, maybe I'll go get him. And I picked him up and I put him in our bed. No trees around that side of the house. And I thought, okay, this is cool. I'm gonna go back to sleep. The power went out sometime that morning, and then the internet went out. And that didn't really seem like a big deal because, you know, the internet goes out, the power goes out. These are things that happen. And normally when the power goes out here, it's on 4 or 5 hours later. We knew it was going to be worse than that. We thought, well, we might be without power all day. The wind died down a little bit. And so my wife and I, we went and sat on the porch and we just kind of watched the trees blowing around. And I thought, gosh, this is more wind than I really ever remember having here. I mean, usually by the time a tropical storm gets here, it's just a lot of rain. There's not a significant amount of wind. And this was something else. And then all of a sudden there was like this lull. The trees stopped moving for a second. And then this noise began to gather like way, way up in the woods. And I still don't know what it was. It wasn't a tornado. Maybe it was a microburst or a downdraft or whatever. I don't know what the weather term for it is. But as we were sitting there, it was as people describe when they talk about a tornado, this sound like a freight train, but faster and coming directly at us. And it was absolutely terrifying. So we got up and we ran inside, and whatever it was passed over us, and then it was done. That was it. And that was kind of the end of the storm. I thought, okay, we made it. Then, by about noon, the power had not come back on and the internet hadn't come back on. And we noticed there wasn't any cell coverage at all. We weren't getting any calls, no texts. And, at some point I think we got bored and I was like, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be a disaster tourist, right? But let's put the boy in the car and go ride around and look at some floodwaters, let's just go see. I want him to have a memory of it. People are going to talk about this for years. Let's go check it out. So we drove around and we looked at the local creek, coming up over the bridge, and we were like, wow, that's incredible, that's a lot of water. And that was kind of it, I'd seen floods before, no big deal. And we were driving home, and then an alert came through on my phone that said, warning, dam failure imminent. The catch is that there is no dam around here. We're not downstream from any dams, but obviously someone was. They sent this message out to, a mass audience, but it didn't say what dam. And that was my first clue of oh, things, if they're in such a situation where they don't identify the dam that is about to fail, things might be worse than they seem from here. Of course, now we all know what happened, but it's important to remember that afternoon there was lots of periods of blue sky. We didn't know that all communication was down. We didn't know that all power was out. We didn't know that there was an official declaration that all roads were impassable. We had no way of knowing that entire towns, communities, had been wiped off the map. We didn't know that there would be no outside help for days. There would be no gasoline deliveries. There would be no open grocery stores. We didn't know that our friends' homes were filled with poisoned mud, that people we hold close had to swim for their lives. And if you had told us, we wouldn't have believed you. In fact, here we get into our personal story. I am a ham radio operator. And so I knew more by the end of that day than 99% of people in the affected area, because I could get on the radio and listen to what people were saying. But I didn't believe what they were saying. I thought for sure it was just fear-mongering and rumors. I did not believe that I-40 was completely destroyed. I did not believe that I-26 going into Tennessee no longer existed. I remember coming in the house and saying to my wife, this is what they're saying on the radio, but I don't believe that. So in thinking about making this video, I drew important distinctions between the short term, the mid-term, and the long term. The short term, when things were actually happening, when the floodwaters were rising. We were fine. We had no problem. Our friends were in mortal danger. Some of our friends barely made it out alive. We had no idea that was going on. It was in the midterm that things got scary for us. In the 48 hours after the disaster, that's when it started to dawn on us that we were in a real situation. I am a photographer. I had a shoot that Saturday night that had been planned for months, and I take my job very seriously, and I would never just not show up for a shoot. So Saturday, I decided I would get in my car and I would drive out a little bit and see if I could make it to the shoot. Spoiler, there was no shoot. I did my best to get in touch with the client. There was no way to get in touch. I couldn't even get their phone number because it was saved in my cloud storage where I save all of my business papers. Couldn't get to that. But when I drove into town and saw people, walking in the middle of the street and other people wrecking at where there used to be a traffic light, I kind of began to realize that maybe that event wasn't going to happen. You would drive around until your phone started blowing up. And then you would stop. You would pull over to the side of the road because for whatever reason you had reached a location where cell service was still being beamed into you. And then after a day or so, you could see the crowds. People would congregate in these places where they could actually get service. And that Saturday I did that. My phone blew up. I pulled over and I got messages from all over the world saying, "Are you okay? Are you still alive?" Family members were like, "Are you okay? And if you are, can you please go check on these other people for us?" That was when things started really getting scary. In preparation for this video, I talked to my wife and asked her to help me remember what the scariest moments from that midterm time were. And here's some things we came up with. Learning that our families lived at the base of mountains where there had been major landslides. That was pretty scary. My wife was in the grocery store. They opened up the grocery store, but they'd only let 10 people in at a time, and 10 people would cycle through the store and get whatever food was available. Obviously, they had perishable stuff they had to throw away. My wife was doing that when there was a shooting in the gas line outside the store. I was stuck in a gas line, and I had a confrontation. I was yelled at by someone who wasn't happy with the way I moved my car. And it was clear looking at them that like in normal times, they would be a normal, rational person, but they just weren't anymore. We had a structure fire in our neighborhood when you couldn't call 911. When you dialed 911, there was nothing but noise on the other end. So that was the situation that we found ourselves in. And to some extent, we're still in that situation, and we will be for a long time. But we're now in the long-term survival stage. We're now in the recovery stage, and that's when you can start to look back and develop takeaways. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? Number one, the authorities, and I include the media in that, the authorities will not actively help you in the short and midterm times of the disaster. I think a lot of people, myself included, we operate under this idea that even by default, we will be told the things we needed to know, and we will be rescued if we get in a terrible situation. That's not true. In our day, you cannot be passively informed. You cannot be supported or rescued passively. You have to take an active and proactive role in your own rescue. I know local officials here, and the ones I know personally absolutely have the best interest of our citizens at heart. They are unable to combat a force of nature. Did they pull people out of the water? Yes. Did they set up a shelter for people that had been displaced that night? Yes, they did. And congratulations, well done. Are they heroes? Yes. Should we praise them and honor them in our society? Yes. Can they help you if they don't know you're in trouble? Absolutely not. Even the best human beings are not able to do inhuman things. We're on our own. I want to reiterate what I said in the beginning. The biggest lesson here is that if you are told to evacuate, evacuate. More than that, if you're not told to leave, but it seems like you should leave, you should leave. A lot of lives were lost because the evacuation orders and the warnings did not get through. Further lives were lost because people did get the warnings and didn't take it seriously. And in that, I include the warning that you get from yourself, from the tingle of fear in your spine when you're looking at a situation that doesn't feel right, the feeling in your gut. When that says go, you need to go. There's a tendency in the prepper community to sort of, especially for mature preppers or people that don't like to identify as preppers, where we kind of roll our eyes at the people that think the answer is stockpiling more stuff. You can't stockpile your way to safety. That's true. Until it isn't. Then it comes back to the very basics of prepping. Have the things you need. Because my dad was a first responder type, because of COVID, because of whatever, my general nature, we had enough food and water and toiletries and medications and pet food and everything we needed. We had that stuff on hand. At no point were we dependent on, not that there's any shame in being dependent on the National Guard, but we didn't have to go get That's not true. We actually did. But in the short to midterm parts of the disaster, we did not have to go to the National Guard or the Red Cross. We were able to stay home and let the people that really, really needed it get help from those organizations. There's a million prepper videos on the internet that talk about what you should stockpile and what's better, AA versus AAA batteries. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Stockpile something. Use your common sense and be prepared. Okay, we finally made it to the part in the video that's going to excite all the internet preppers. Like, there's nothing an internet prepper loves more than a good list. Like a list of things I wish I had during the storm. First on the list, I wish I'd had about 10,000 more rounds of 5.56 green tip for my AR-15. I'm just kidding. That didn't enter into the equation at all. We're gonna have to address this. Let's just get to it. I don't know why the internet prepping community is obsessed with guns, except that we're all Americans here, so it's just kind of, we were born that way. I like guns. I have guns. Did I use a gun during Helene? Kind of. I did not fire a gun during Helene. I did not patrol with an assault rifle during Helene. Did I carry a gun? Yes, I did. 72 hours after the storm, I decided it was time to use my 1 tank of gas to go check on family members that may or may not be under a pile of rubble that used to be a mountain. And I did that. And that day, I open carried a sidearm. I was in good company. This story involves driving up into the outlying communities in the mountains, and I don't think I saw another, adult male without a firearm. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. That's none of my business. I just know that, was I glad I had it? Yeah. Internet commandos, listen to me. Listen, all right, I'm serious here. You might think you're a badass posting your gun on Reddit or taking your concealed carry class or shooting IDPA or whatever it is you do, and I've done all that stuff. More power to you. When you holster that gun and there's even the slightest thought in your head of, holy shit, I might have to use this today, it's a different thing entirely. In all fairness to the crazy, crazy gun nuts that like to stockpile ammo in case of a storm, I don't know, what are you gonna shoot the flood? I don't think that's gonna help, but in fairness to you guys, there was a buddy of mine lived in a different part of town, did have to deploy his rifle. He did not have to shoot anyone, but someone did try to break into his house. And when they saw him standing behind his front door with an AR-15, they reconsidered their decision. While I was sitting on the porch on multiple occasions, folks came into the neighborhood on foot or on a bike that I've never seen before, that definitely don't live on our street. And I did get the feeling that we were being assessed for vulnerabilities. And this was probably at the 3 or 4 day point where people are desperate. People are either desperate or they know other people are desperate and they know other people are stressed out and vulnerable. So while I'm trying to make light of this, and while I would love to make fun of my gun nut brethren a little bit, the truth is that there were concerns and there were some really tense moments. Here's the information I really wish I'd had. A list of our prescriptions. A list of our medical conditions. We don't have a lot of them, but it would have been nice if someone's unconscious or something and you got to tell an EMT what's going on with them. Yeah, have a list. I wish I'd had a list of our bank accounts. All the numbers and stuff, the routing, that would have been good. This is specific to me, but I wish I'd had a list of ham radio repeaters, their frequencies, their offsets, and their PL tones, just in case. Everything was already programmed into the radio, but if I'd had to program someone else's radio, like, here, take this radio, I'm going to program it for you, I don't know that I could have done that. I wish I had hard copy basic first aid booklets. Like, here's how to put on a tourniquet, here's how to stop bleeding, here's what to do if someone gets burned. Okay, next item. I wish that I had basic writing utensils, legal pads, sticky notes, index cards, whatever, lots of pens, lots of pencils, because when I was copying traffic from the ham radio, there's nothing to write it on. I'm not used to actually writing. I type everything into a computer. So yeah, I had a notepad that's about this big. That gets really tedious. And these things cost $2 at the grocery store. It's legal pads, pens. It should have been easy, but I never thought of it. I wish, and this was a big one, I wish we'd had more than one fire extinguisher. You're going to be cooking with an open flame. In a situation like this, there's all kinds of ways that can go wrong. The fire department has no way of knowing when your house catches on fire, because you can't call them. And we'll get into this story a little bit more, but I had an occasion where I had to use our fire extinguisher on a neighbor's house that was burning down. And even as I was using it, because I knew it was a waste. I knew it wasn't going to stop the fire. Even as I was using it, I was like, do I really want to do this? Because what happens if we knock over our alcohol stove in the kitchen? So yes, fire extinguishers and backup fire extinguishers. I really wish I had better maintained boots and fishing waders. I threw my fishing waders away a while ago because I don't like to fish in cold water anyway, and they kept getting leaks in them. What's the point? Threw them away. My boots are okay, but they stay in the basement. They get spiders in them when I'm not using them, and I hadn't used them in a while when the storm hit, and so it took a lot of effort to put them on. It's funny, you can be standing in a field of toxic, like sewage mud, and you're like, do I really want to put my foot in this boot that's been in my basement? Here's a really important one that really shocked me that we were unprepared for. Listen to me carefully. A battery-powered AM/FM radio. That's it, a battery-powered one. Now, I had this super-duper survival AM/FM radio that's got a solar panel on it, and it's got a hand crank. That is useless. Most days after the storm, it was cloudy. The radio never charged enough in the sun to work. And you really don't want to be hand cranking a radio while your wife is like carrying buckets in from the neighbor's truck. Like when she's doing real work and you're sitting there like, oh yeah, I'll help in a second. After a couple of days, my wife remembered that she had an old CD player in storage. I went and found it, and it took C batteries. No one has any C batteries. So I actually made a jig and wired some wired enough AA batteries together to work and ran wires into the CD player and took the broken antenna and unbent it, and we were able to listen to the emergency broadcast that way. Buy a $10 radio on Amazon and spend 50 cents on some batteries and you'll be fine. Now we have gotten to the big items, the really important things. Buckets. I don't care if you're in your doomsday bunker that is made of buckets. You don't have enough buckets. The night before the storm, I went to Home Depot and I bought, I think, 2 buckets because we were here in 2004 and we lived through that mess and we learned that your life revolves around buckets. And I'm standing in the Home Depot checkout and there's, an older lady checking me out and she's like, oh, I know what you're doing. And I'm like, yeah, why isn't anyone else doing it? And she was like, I don't know. The reason is we're a tourist town. Most people weren't here in 2004. Most people didn't live through that. They don't remember. When your water supply goes out, you cannot flush your toilet. To flush your toilet, you will need a bucket of water. There was a big debate about whether non-potable water is called non-potable or non-potable. I don't know. I'm going to say potable. Non-potable water became incredibly important. And how do you get the non-potable water to your toilet tank? Because that's where you use it. Here's the other thing. While we're talking about this, I don't know who needs to hear this, but I'm going to say it directly to you. You can flush a household toilet by pouring water into the bowl or into the tank. You can do that. You don't have to poop in a bag and throw it in your trash. Now, don't think that I'm implying that there was an alarming number of people that didn't know how to do that. Don't think that definitely didn't happen. Everyone in Asheville had perfect toilet hygiene. But again, some people, a lot of people, have never done this before. The toilet doesn't flush when you push the button. What do? I don't know. I'll poop in a bag. Don't do that. Poop in the toilet like a civilized person. Flush it with a bucket. But you will not believe how many buckets of water you need. Our neighbors, God bless them, took their truck to a local creek. They filled up giant bins and they put them in the truck bed and they brought it here and all the neighbors would come to their truck and they would get their buckets of water and they'd haul them back to the house. So while I'm thinking about this, let me add to the list. I really wish we'd had a rain barrel. That would have been helpful. So after the midterm crisis was over, we're in today 5 or 6 now. Water became everything. Water was the thing. Now there were still people in the outlying counties that needed helicopters, that needed to be choppered in medicine and food. But here in Asheville, things by the end of the first week, things had settled down. A lot of people still didn't have power. It took us 6 days to get power back. But at that point, the big concern was water. And it took over our lives for 54 days. That's how long we could not drink the water coming out of our faucet. Now, I think at 30 some odd days, we started taking showers. There was a lot of debate about whether it was safe to take a shower. Let me back up. Let me explain. This is a complicated thing, and folks that aren't local, folks that just kind of watch this from afar in the national media probably don't know this. Asheville gets 80% of its water from a lake up in the mountains. The lake up in the mountains is called the North Fork Reservoir. Back in 2004, in the flood of 2004, the supply pipe, I don't know the technical terms, the supply pipe washed out of the reservoir. And the city was without water for, I don't know, it was horrible. It was like a week without water. So after 2004, the city was smart. And they said, our supply pipe was washed out. Not only are we going to repair it, we're going to put in a new, additional second pipe. We're going to make it half again as big. We're going to reinforce it with extra steel and concrete, and we're going to bury it 35 feet under the ground so that if a nuclear weapon lands on our reservoir, the pipe will survive. Hurricane Helene obliterated this pipe. It was gone. That was the situation that Asheville was facing. FEMA had to dig a well under the hospital so the hospital could keep operating. The thing is, when you have no water and you've just been in a situation where, trillions of gallons of sewage and poison have washed over your town, that is a situation with greatly increased risk for horrible diseases. One of the scariest moments for me, and it's a little personal, but one night while we were still without power, I woke up in the middle of the night and had intense gastrointestinal distress. And looking back, it was because I had been eating prepper food. In the moment, with sweat pouring off my face, I thought, I have gotten some sort of waterborne pathogen, and I'm going to die. There was no room in the hospital. They were not able to treat people in the hospital. I didn't know if I could call an ambulance to get to the hospital. Most people in history, in giant, horrible situations, world wars, that kind of thing, most people that die of dysentery. Now, we were drinking bottled water. We never consumed questionable water, but your dishes sit in the sink for 2 days because there's no water to wash them, and then you kind of scrub them off with some soap and a bottle of water. Is that really getting them clean? Who knows? There's no way to know until you start puking your guts out in the middle of the night. You need a system for washing dishes. Spray bottles. You need spray bottles. And bins. You have a bin. The way we did this is you have a series of bins. Soapy, dirty water, cleaner water, and then final rinse, and then you have a spray bottle because it's way, way more efficient than pouring a bottle of water over a plate. Other people did other things. Other people used bleach. Other people boiled a big pot of water on the stove after the power came back on, and they would scald their dishes to make sure they were clean. I wish we had had a system for drinking water. When the disaster happened, you couldn't go to Home Depot and buy a blue water jug. You couldn't go get the things to make the system. Now, after having gone through this, we have a bunch of blue jugs. We have a stand to put the blue jugs on, and like a faucet that just screws onto the blue jug. So you just get drinking water that way. Have lids for the blue jugs, because when you go to the National Guard to fill them up, you don't want them splashing around in the trunk of your car. Finally, have disposable plates and utensils. Oh my gosh, it was the amount of work, the amount of time we spent into washing dishes when we could have just had a cardboard box full of paper plates and plastic forks. It boggles the mind. So now we're to our final list. And it's not as impulse buying friendly, because these, instead of things I wish I'd had, these are things I wish I had known. Number one, you're not going to make it out of this unscathed. There will be emotional tolls that you'll be paying for the rest of your life if you live through something like this. We were very, very fortunate in that we did not lose anyone close to us. We knew people who were lost, and we knew their families, and to know that their families were frantically searching for them or for a body after a few days, and there's nothing you can do about it. Because you can't go anywhere, you can't call anyone. That's hard. We lost places. We lost whole towns, but I lost places that you saw my video. I'll link it down below. But 1 month after the storm, I went to some of the places where I grew up, and those places are gone. That's hard. We almost lost friends. Some of our friends, families that we know, almost didn't make it. Almost. People had to be rescued through their roofs with axes. Like neighbors were rescuing other people in kayaks with axes, chopping through their roofs to get them out of their attics. In the first few days, in some areas, there were bodies hanging in the trees. That's hard. So I wish I had known. I spend a lot of time thinking I've been through a lot in my life. I've seen more than my fair share of stuff just because of my job and circumstance or whatever, and I think I can handle it. And I did handle it. Until I didn't. I said earlier, I misspoke. We never really needed to go get supplies from the National Guard or the Red Cross, and that was not true. We needed water. But it was after the midterm was over. It was several weeks in that we went through all of our stockpile of water, and we really did need to go get water. And there was this moment where I had my son in the car, and it was my first time, and I drove into the county complex, the sports park where the aid station was set up, and I drove in and I sat in the line and we snaked around, and there was these all these soldiers filling up bottles and handing out MREs and blankets, and I got my son in the car, and and I got out, and I was handing a water bottle or a bucket or something off to be filled, and another soldier was just like, here, take some MREs, and I was like, we're okay. No, take the MREs, take a blanket. And I was like, no, I don't need that. And he was like, everybody needs that. And I lost it. When you have that moment where soldiers are handing you supplies because you actually need them, that's a life-changing moment. Survivor's guilt sucks. And before I experienced it, I've always read about it, and I'm like, God, quit being so selfish. Quit allowing yourself the luxury of guilt. You lived through it. And then when you actually experience survivor's guilt, you're being selfish. You know that that the guilt is an indulgence, but you can't get your brain around it. You can't control it, and that's okay. That's okay that it's out of control. The best you can do is hope to control the times in which you lose control. Next line item on the list, the hardest, the most difficult to navigate moments were when my wife and I disagreed about how unsafe something was. And I think that, it was like, she was like, I really want to go get some fresh produce. I haven't eaten anything but dehydrated meals in 4 days. I really want to go out. And I'm like, you can't go out. There's a disaster out there. And when you're both under a ton of stress, those arguments get way more intense than they need to be. And I wish I had been prepared. I wish we'd both been prepared for that. Hey, we're going to have disagreements. How do we deal with them in the best way? We got a kid to take care of. It's a legitimate thing for me to not want you to go get shot. It's also a legitimate thing for you to be like, I'm not going to go get shot. I just want to go buy some, cucumbers. I wish I had known during a disaster, you will be busy. There will not be an idle moment. Now, this is from a family with a child, and I guess there were definitely people that had idle moments, actually. And what would happen is you'd go out to try to do something. You try to haul some water. You try to, take a branch off your roof or whatever, and neighbors would be walking by and they talk to you. And that's great because community is everything. Community is everything, and nobody can communicate with their phones. And so they all come and they actually talk to you face to face. And I actually kind of missed that part. But in the moment, when you're up on your roof trying to repair your gutter, or you've got 5 gallons of water on each arm, it gets kind of annoying. So that's something you will have to navigate. There's always something to do. You're busy all the time. It now takes 20 times longer to make a meal or to wash dishes. No one's had a shower in 10 days. What do you do when people want to talk to you? You have to navigate those situations. The last thing, and this really should have been higher on the list, is you will not. I know people like to stockpile beans and rice for like the long-term apocalypse that we all know is coming, and that's a good idea. You will not want beans and rice in a disaster like this. You will want quick, easy, nutritious, good-tasting meals. We had Mountain House meals. I'm really glad we had Mountain House meals instead of MREs. Look at my YouTube short about eating my first MRE. Stockpile good food, at least for the first 2 weeks or so that you're planning to be in a disaster. Okay, I think that covers the lists. We got through all the items. Sorry, it was kind of disorganized and we went off into rabbit holes. There's a couple more things I need to say. Again, community is everything. It's not the community. It's not the state, the town. Your community, your personal community is everything. That means your family, your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, your associates, the people you don't really like but you tolerate, they're all your community. No single person, no single family can be ready for all eventualities. A community can be. The items that we didn't have, we were able to source from our community. When our community didn't have an item, we were able to give that to our community. And that, whatever that means to you, your family, your friends, it's everything. On our street, we had a radio guy, we had 2 nurses, we had a chef, and you think, well, what good is that? I don't need to eat charcuterie during a disaster. No, you need someone whose job is all about food safety. Every day I was asking my neighbor, hey, this apple juice was on the counter for 24 hours. Like, is it safe? No, that's not safe. Don't give that to your kid. We have an architect. We have hard-working, like, manual labor types. The architect came in really handy when people started saying, well, maybe they'll get the water back on, in a week or so. And he was like, did you hear what happened to the pipe? The point is, you will never know who you will need. And you will never know who will need you. We woke up on day 6, still no power. At that point, you could not call 911. You could text 911, and they had been saying this on the emergency broadcasts, and I had been listening every day. We woke up to explosions and yelling, and I about 0600, I rolled over in bed and looked out the window, and there was a wall of flame where my neighbor's house should be. This was obviously less than ideal. I've been on the scene of more than my fair share of structure fires, and the guy that lived in this dwelling, he was distraught to the point that I've never seen anyone that distraught. Most people, this is weird, but most people, when their house burns down, they just stand there quietly and watch. It's a weird thing. This guy was not being quiet. He was screaming, he was crying, he was yelling, he was running and waving his arms. And my first thought was, oh God, there's someone still inside. There was no one inside. There was no one inside. But obviously it was still quite a situation. And so I called 911 and got nothing but noise, like dial-up modem style noise in my ear. Even though I was the radio guy and I was the guy copying down information from the emergency broadcast, and I had heard over and over again, you can't call 911, but you can still text 911. That went right out of my head. Our other neighbor, who lived in the house right next door and had 3 kids that she was evacuating from her house that's next to the burning house, she had the presence of mind to text 911. And that's why the fire department showed up and saved our neighborhood. This is why community is everything. We cannot all navigate each aspect of a disaster. Here I am, I'm the communications guy. I'm the guy that likes to transmit clear information, right? Completely useless in this scenario because I panicked. There's no rhyme or reason to who's going to be able to function in a specific situation. The fire department rolled 5 engines up my back drive here, and I counted 50 firefighters on scene. Literally 10 seconds after they got there, the fire was out. It was amazing. They did a great job. Not a single one of them came to help the guy whose house just burned down. They came and asked him, "Are you burned?" And he said no. And they were like, "Did you inhale any smoke?" And he said no. And we were sitting with him and we were like, he's okay. He's just out of his mind upset. So the guy is laying there in the wet grass, and it was neighbors that brought him a space blanket and something to eat. And then one of the nurses who lives on our street, I'm watching the fire and I turn around and she's sitting in her scrubs. She was just coming back from the hospital after working a whole shift. She's sitting in the wet grass in her scrubs, and this guy is in her lap just sobbing with a space blanket over him. That's your community. There are so many, the vast majority of internet preppers on YouTube, on fora, talk about how you're going to want to stay away from people when the shit hits the fan. You're going to want to get away. Get out of the city, get to some remote area where you can be alone and where people won't be a threat. That is wrong. You need other people. More importantly than that, other people need you. We were put here to take care of each other. And you can believe that or not, you can consider that a duty or not. But if you are not interested in taking care of each other, what's the point in surviving? So that's it. That's the deep dive into what I learned, what my takeaways were, and what it was actually like to live through Hurricane Helene. I thank you for sticking with me. I know this was long. I hope that this information is helpful. Actually, I don't. I hope you never need this information. But we know that you probably will. There are helicopters flying over our neighborhood today, taking water to the giant forest fires that are encroaching on the city of Asheville on the 6-month anniversary of Hurricane Helene. This is the world we live in, and I hope you stay safe in it, and I hope you keep a tight hold on your values and keep the ends out for the ties that bind.